In the first months of 2026, a team of archaeologists pointed their instruments at an empty stretch of desert in southern Iraq, and what appeared on their screens stopped them cold. Buried beneath the scorched sand, just 15 kilometers from the Iranian border, lay something historians had been chasing for over 2,000 years, an entire lost city. Not a village, not a fort, a vast metropolis, and it was built by the most famous conqueror who ever lived, Alexander the Great. This is not an old story being recycled. This is a brand new confirmation happening right now, using technology that did not even exist a generation ago. But here's the question that has haunted researchers for centuries, the question this new discovery is only now beginning to answer. If this city was so powerful, so enormous, so legendary that ancient Roman writers described it by name, then how did it completely vanish from the face of the earth? And why did no one confirm its location for nearly 1,700 years? Because what these archaeologists pulled out of the ground in 2026 is not what anyone expected. And the scientific evidence they gathered tells a story stranger than any legend. Think about this for a moment. We're talking about Alexander the Great, a man whose every battle, every conquest, every footstep was recorded and studied for thousands of years. We know where he was born, we know where he fought, we know almost to the day when he died. His life is one of the most documented in all of human history. And yet, one of the last cities he ever founded, a city he personally chose the location for, simply disappeared. No ruins on the surface, no monuments, nothing but empty desert. For generations, the textbooks could not even tell you where it was. Mainstream history had quietly given up on it, filed it away as a footnote, a place that maybe existed, maybe didn't. But a small team refused to let it stay buried. And what they uncovered in 2026 is now forcing historians to rewrite what we thought we knew about the ancient world. To understand this mystery, we have to travel back to the year 324 BC. Alexander had just conquered the largest empire the world had ever seen, stretching from Greece all the way to the edge of India. He was returning home through the marshlands of southern Mesopotamia. And here, at the place where the mighty Tigris River met the open sea, he stopped. According to the Roman writer Pliny the Elder, our key ancient source, Alexander personally chose this exact spot to build a brand new port city. He named it Alexandria, not the famous one in Egypt that everybody knows, a second Alexandria, a twin city, and he settled it with his own loyal war veterans, men who had marched with him to the ends of the known world. This was meant to be his gateway to the riches of the East, a city designed to control the flow of treasure between 3 continents. It was one of the very last things he created before his sudden death just 1 year later, at the age of only 32. And then, slowly, it slipped out of history entirely. So how do you lose an entire city built by a king the whole world still remembers by name? Here is where the story takes a turn that mainstream documentaries rarely tell you about. The team did not find the city by digging. They couldn't. The region is one of the most dangerous places on Earth to do archaeology in active conflict zone, with summer temperatures that climb past 49 degrees Celsius, that is over 120 degrees Fahrenheit. So instead, they turned to science. First came the drones, thousands of high-resolution aerial images, captured from above and stitched together by computer software into a flawless 3-dimensional digital map of the ground, accurate down to a few centimeters. And then came the real breakthrough, a cesium magnetometer. Now, that sounds complicated, but the science behind it is beautifully simple. Every buried wall, every ancient street, every old furnace, they each disturb the Earth's natural magnetic field in a tiny, precisely measurable way. Fired clay and brick hold a faint magnetic signature. Empty trenches and stone leave a different one. This instrument reads those invisible signals and converts them into a picture. It lets scientists see straight through solid ground and trace the outline of an entire city without ever lifting a single shovel. It is, in effect, an X-ray of the past. No damage, no destruction, just hard data pulled silently out of the soil. And the science did not stop there. The few artifacts they did recover were studied to pin down dates, the pottery styles. The corroded coins, crucially, not a single coin found on the surface dated later than the early 3rd century. Each piece of physical evidence pointed to the same conclusion independently. When the magnetic data finally came back, the lead researcher said the quality of the evidence was, in his words, absolutely stunning. The walls appeared immediately, just beneath the surface, and what those magnetic ghosts revealed left the entire team speechless. This was not a small outpost. This was not a trading post. The buried city stretched across roughly 6 square kilometers. Its defensive walls ran for over 3 kilometers and still stood 8 meters tall. That is the height of a 2-story building, hidden under the desert sand for nearly 2,000 years. But the most shocking detail was something only careful measurement could reveal: the size of the city blocks. Now stay with me, because this is the part that changes everything. The researchers precisely measured the individual residential blocks and compared them, foot by foot, to the greatest cities of the ancient world. The blocks here were larger than the blocks of Seleucia, larger than the blocks of Antioch, and larger even than the original Alexandria in Egypt. In the exact words of the lead archaeologist, the size of these city blocks is extraordinary. It surpasses even the major capitals of the time. Let that sink in. A city we had completely lost, that the world had forgotten even existed, was actually built on a grander scale than some of the most famous cities in human history. And no one had been able to scientifically confirm it until now. And as the scans went deeper, the hidden city began to reveal its secrets, room by room, street by street. There was a sprawling residential district where thousands of people once lived their entire lives, multiple temple complexes, an entire industrial quarter filled with workshops, kilns, and smelting furnaces, clustered right next to an inner harbor where ancient ships were loaded and unloaded. There was a network of canals and a vast irrigation system feeding grain fields to the north, enough to feed a population that some estimates place in the hundreds of thousands, and set apart from everything else, a palace, a massive compound, possibly ringed by private gardens, standing alone in its own quiet corner of the city, far from the noise of the markets. In the few small test trenches they were actually allowed to dig, the team uncovered the columns of a grand courtyard still standing after 2,000 years, with the original mason's marks carved into the stone by hands that lived in an age we can barely imagine. Think about that for just a second. The fingerprints of the ancient world, frozen in stone, completely untouched, waiting silently in the dark for someone to find them again. But the real story, the reason this city mattered so much to the entire ancient world, was about to come into focus. And it had everything to do with the river. For more than 550 years, this city was one of the beating hearts of the ancient global economy. This was the gateway, the single point where treasure from India, Central Asia, and even distant China entered the Mesopotamian world. Spices, pearls, ivory, rare perfumes, exotic rosewood, semi-precious stones, possibly Chinese silk itself. All of it flowed through this one port and then onward to the markets of the Roman Empire. The city was even famous for its pearl divers, who plunged into the warm waters of the Gulf to bring up treasures destined for the necks of the wealthiest people in the ancient world. The Roman Emperor Trajan himself is said to have traveled all the way here in the year 116 AD and stood watching the ships sail off toward India, reportedly wishing he were young enough to follow them. This was not some forgotten backwater. This was a superhighway of ancient wealth, living proof that the world 2,000 years ago was far more connected and far more advanced than most people are ever taught in school. So we return to the great mystery. A city this rich, this powerful, this enormous. How does it just disappear? For years, you might assume the answer was war, an invasion, a massacre, a great fire that burned it from the map in a single night. But the evidence points to something far quieter and somehow far more chilling. The killer was not an army, it was the river itself. The entire life of this city depended on one thing: water. Its harbor, its trade, its survival. All of it relied on the Tigris flowing right past its docks. And then, slowly, silently, over generations, the river began to move. This is not a guess. Geologists can read it in the layers of sediment buried across the plain. Year after year, silt piled up. The coastline of the Persian Gulf crept further and further away, and the Tigris quietly shifted its entire course to the west. By the 3rd century AD, the harbor was dry. The ships had nowhere to dock. And remember those coins, not one found on the surface, dated later than that exact period. The science and the story matched perfectly. The lifeblood of the city had simply walked away. There was no dramatic ending, no final battle, no burning towers. Just a city, slowly stranded in the middle of an empty plain, abandoned, forgotten, and eventually swallowed whole by the sand. And maybe that is the most unsettling truth of all. Some of the greatest things humans ever built were not destroyed by enemies, they were simply left behind by nature. But here is what makes this 2026 confirmation so remarkable. The first real clue did not come from a dig, it came from the sky. Back in the 1960s, a British researcher studying old Royal Air Force aerial photographs spotted the faint outline of an enormous walled enclosure in the desert. He believed it matched the ancient descriptions left behind by Pliny. He thought he had found it. But then history got in the way. Decades of war made the site impossible to reach. During the Iran-Iraq War, soldiers actually carved trenches and bunkers straight into the ancient walls, turning a 2,000-year-old monument into a modern battlefield. Researchers later counted thousands of scars left across its surface. Then came the rise of extremist groups controlling huge stretches of the region. For years, anyone who dared to study this place had to do it under the watchful eyes of armed soldiers and police, traveling in armored vehicles. It took until the last few years and a fearless international team to finally bring the technology, the access, and the raw courage together in the same place at the same time. And even then, they had to race against the clock. And this is why this discovery is so much bigger than one lost city. Because the empire that ran this city in its final centuries, the Parthians, were long dismissed by historians as disorganized, as little more than a corridor that other people's goods passed through on the way between Rome and the East. But this metropolis tells a completely different story. It reveals a sophisticated, deliberate, fabulously wealthy civilization that actively controlled and profited from global trade, one that the history books quietly underestimated for centuries. And it confirms something the ancient writers tried to tell us all along, that Alexander did not choose this spot by accident. He saw, with terrifying clarity, that whoever controlled this single point of water would control the wealth of the world. This one rediscovery is now forcing scholars to redraw the map of the ancient world and to admit, perhaps uncomfortably, that what we were taught was incomplete. So how did a city built by Alexander the Great vanish for 1,700 years? Not through war, not through a curse, but through the slow, invisible betrayal of the very river that gave it life, and through centuries of conflict that kept the world from ever looking closely enough. It was hiding in plain sight the entire time. 8-meter walls, a buried palace, the bones of a global empire all waiting silently beneath the dust, just 15 kilometers from a modern border. And the most haunting part of all? The team has barely scratched the surface. The wars in the region forced them to postpone their full excavation, sometimes at the very last moment. Which means the palace, the temples, the harbor, the homes are all still sealed, still silent, still waiting beneath the dust. Everything we have learned so far came from machines reading the ground from above. Not a single shovel has touched the heart of this city. Imagine what is still down there. Somewhere out in that desert, an entire lost city is holding its breath, ready to reveal secrets we have not even dared to imagine yet. The past is never truly gone. It is only buried, waiting for someone curious enough to look. If this discovery left you staring at the screen in wonder, then you already know what to do. Hit that like button to help more curious minds find this story. Subscribe so you never miss the next hidden chapter of human history, and tell me in the comments. If you could be the first to step inside Alexander's lost palace, what is the one thing you would hope to find waiting in the dark? Until the next discovery, keep questioning, keep digging, and keep looking for the secrets the world forgot.